And so with your partner John, was there anything in particular you did to add value to him? Like was there a certain skill or role in that I won't say it a flip, but that project that you were responsible for?
Yeah, the first so that first 8 unit we were just passive investors. We didn't do anything on. The next one we helped find the properties. We helped do a lot of the day-to-day management of the asset side of things, not the property management. Um, we helped to raise some money. We helped with the investor relations. Basically, we took all the grunt work off his plate and allowed him just kind of take the back seat to a certain degree. Um, he had to oversee what we were doing because we were still newer, and I'm sure we didn't do everything correct. But it was a 17-unit property; it wasn't anything huge. So we just kind of said, "Hey, we'll do your grunt work," and he was willing to let us try and kind of give us guide rails to go along.
Could you dive a little more into that grunt work? I think a lot of people before they get in, they don't really understand like where can I add value to someone, and if you could like describe that, it'll really help people visualize like, hey, I can do that. Like I could definitely provide value to some operator in
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Yeah. So, we basically said we'll be free labor in a way. So we just kind of said, hey, what do you need? And we'll do it. The day-to-day stuff, when you get a new property, there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be done for new investors, operating agreements, investor questionnaires that you need to get, file, handle with your attorney and your accountant. So it was a lot of communicating with investors, getting things organized. Asset management is just looking at rent rolls every month, looking at financials every month, comparing them to your budget, making any changes as needed, communicating with the property manager. If there's contractors on the property, communicating with them. Depending upon how sophisticated the property is, you could have construction loans that you need to communicate with the lender with. That property didn't have that, so it wasn't a concern. We would handle, once we closed, any communications with the investors. So there is some things that you can do. One thing that we also did that was helpful at the time was at Meetup. John was starting to do it, and we just kind of took over a lot of the stuff. So the organizing, the getting people in. Eventually, we got in guest speakers to help run it, help with the presentation, help get everything set up. So kind of just he would just show up at the end of the day. So it's kind of just willing to do things that would take things off his plate to give him more time, because time is a commodity.
So how far into that meetup did you guys sort of just start running it for him?
Almost, the second one.
Okay, great. So that leads right into my next question. As someone who's still pretty new to the business, I mean, was there any discomfort or like mental roadblocks to starting a meetup and, really establishing yourself as a thought leader?
It's tough because we leaned on him and he had more, he had a track record already. However, if I kind of put it in a bubble in its own world, don't ever lie and try to position yourself as something you're not. As you become a thought leader, you can become a thought leader, but still rely on whatever experience you have. I mean, if you had literally no experience and you were going to start a meetup, just say that, like, this is a meetup for beginners. I'm going to bring in experts to kind of talk. You don't have to position yourself as the expert if you're not. Because in my opinion, if you do that, you're going to get found out very quickly. You're only going to fool people so long and they're going to see right through it. Someone who actually knows what they're talking about is going to come in and call bullshit, and you're going to look like a fool. So just be creative in the way you're going to set it up, and don't try to be bigger than what you are, but just be confident in what you've done so far. And as you're newer and younger, just be willing to continue to learn and hustle and help other people, and people will respect that tremendously.
Do you have any tips that you would give people if they wanted to start their own meetup, how they would go about doing that?
I mean, we didn't do anything special. We just made a meetup, started it, and people either showed up or they didn't. I think people just value consistency, and they want to know why they should come. So for us, it was the first couple we had at a bar, and it was just networking. People like networking. And then as we were talking to people, oftentimes we'd get questions about things or how to do things. So we said, why don't we just start turning it into partially educational? So we moved it to a hotel and we did like a 20, 30-minute presentation on a topic type thing where it was informal. It wasn't like a class. It was just like get up there and talk about things. And we started doing that. And then eventually we would have people ask us questions or request to talk about things that we weren't an expert in. So we would bring other people to talk about it. So whether it was flipping, tax, insurance, Section 8, wholesaling, non-performing notes. I mean, we had a lot of different things that people came in to talk about that we weren't expert in. We had other multifamily people come in. We did a panel. So we just tried to change it up and give something that people would find interesting and value in, and then also leave time for networking, because that's why a lot of people go to these things.
Yeah. I feel like at least in our experience, even if you're not the expert on the subject, when you get to bring in the expert, you're kind of rubbing shoulders with them, and you're ultimately the one who establishes the relationship with them, just like through running the meetup or hosting your own podcast. So, I mean, you really do learn and grow exponentially faster by just doing something that. And you're right, you don't have to like establish yourself as like some big guru who's been in the business for 3 decades when you're like 25 years old.
Yeah. I mean, no, you don't have to do that at all. I think if you just do something that people can find, I keep saying this, but find value in, people will recognize that. And eventually, as you do it for long enough, you'll start to be the one who's more experienced, and you can start putting yourself in that position. And as you learn more, you can talk about little things, or you can provide value by asking questions as a beginner and having good questions that people might not think to ask. So if you know it's going to be, if you've bringing in an expert on flipping, spend a few hours coming up with good, valuable questions for that expert that are going to give value to people. They'll recognize that. Like if you have really intelligent questions for people that make people think and gets good responses from that person, like that's going to make you stand out as well. They're going to be like, oh, wow, that was a really good question. Like, this kid's got something. He's onto something, right? Like, just don't try to, do whatever you can and do it to the best of your ability. Just don't front.